tales for dark nights.
The following performance is a third-round entry in the 2016 Evil Idol voice acting competition, and you, the listener, get to help decide who wins. If you'd like to hear more of this contestant, voting for them is simple and only takes a moment. Just click the thumbs up icon. Can't stand them? Then click the thumbs down icon instead, and cast them into the digital netherrealm from whence they came. You decide their fate. Good luck to all of our contestants.
The Mischief Men. Written by Michael Marks. Performed by Maribel Linares for Chilling Tales for Dark Nights and the Evil Idol competition.
Do you know about the Mischief Men, Caitlin?
My cousin Connor asked the question out of the blue, halfway through building our Lego castle. He picked up a red brick and placed it on top of a blue wall. I ignored the OCD itch in the back of my head, reminding myself that he was only 5. My Uncle Tim's wife had passed away a year earlier. He had asked if I could watch Connor while he was on a business trip. Nope. I grabbed a red brick and placed it next to his before shrugging with a smile. I decided if I couldn't fight the OCD, I might as well try and make a new pattern.
Oh, but why don't you know about them?
He seemed very disappointed.
They come at night and move things around. Daddy gets mad about it. He thinks it's me, but it's not.
Tim had told me about the fact that Connor had been acting out lately. He'd been getting out of bed in the middle of the night and moving things around in the living room, turning on faucets and lights, and just doing little things for attention. Tim had said he was blaming it on imaginary friends. I figured that's who these Mischief Men were. Well, what do they look like? I decided to indulge his imagination and learn more about his imaginary friends.
Are you crazy?
There was a look of shock on his face, as if I'd offended him by asking the question.
They are invisible.
I snickered at his mispronunciation. You mean invisible. He gave me a curious look, and then shook his head.
Yes. I see them move stuff, though.
He was playing with the blocks, as if he were telling me about his day in preschool.
I asked them if they was ghosts, but they said no.
Oh, so you've talked to them. I was still smiling, but I felt a chill creep into my spine. Something felt very strange. My uncle wouldn't be back for the whole weekend, and for the first time that Friday evening, I started to feel a little like maybe I wasn't ready for this. I was 16 and had babysitting jobs before, but this was the first time I would be watching a kid for the whole weekend.
Course I have.
He looked up at me with big puppy dog eyes and a little smile on his face. I started to wonder how I was letting him get to me with his tall tales. His acting out made perfect sense. His mother's sudden death from an embolism had shocked us all. I had no idea how a kid could even process something like that.
They tell me to stay in bed, and that I should go back to sleep, and that they'll come back and visit with me.
Oh, do they now?
I think they just like to play pranks, like the ones in my book.
He smiled and grabbed another red brick, stacking it on top of the last one. In your book? He rolled his eyes at me, in the way only a 5-year-old can, and brought me back a tattered old children's book titled The Mischief Men. I thumbed through it, and it seemed to be about a group of little elves who went around and played pranks, but they learned in the end that pranks can get you in trouble. Typical little Don't be bad tale for kids. Standard fare, if oddly titled. Want me to read this to you tonight for bedtime? I asked, holding the book up. He shook his head no and grabbed the book from my hand. He took it over to his bookshelf and pulled out another one about dinosaurs and brought that one over.
Read this one instead. I like this one.
He smiled and went and sat back down in front of the blocks. You got it, kiddo. I set the book down next to me and looked over at the clock. It was 8:15 p.m. already. Speaking of bedtime, we gotta get your PJs on and get you in bed. He frowned and complained about not being done with the castle, but I insisted. We got his pajamas on and his teeth brushed. I read him his dinosaur book, and he ended up falling asleep before we got to the Triceratops. He had worn me out that afternoon before his dad had even left, playing games with me, and I was beat too. I decided I would probably just lay on the couch and watch TV till I fell asleep. I made it a quarter of the way into an episode of one of those CSI shows before I, too, was out like a light. I woke up at about 2:30 a.m., according to the clock under the living room television. My throat felt dry, and my body ached from falling asleep oddly on the couch. I sat up with a groggy, swimming head and navigated my way to the kitchen, using the soft blue light from the television. I got my water and started making my way back towards the living room to shut off the television, when suddenly I smacked my knee on a dining room chair that was suddenly blocking my path. "Motherfucker!" I said, the water I was drinking spilling down the front of my shirt as a sharp pain shot through my knee. Once I collected myself, I was struck by confusion. I had come through that exact same way only a few seconds before, and there was no chair. It seems the Mischief men had struck. "Connor!" I yelled, the annoyance crystal clear in my voice. "That wasn't funny. I could have tripped. You get your little butt back to bed now." I pushed the chair out of the way and peeked around the corner into the hall. I expected to at least catch Connor fleeing back into his room, but instead I saw nothing but the closed bedroom doors and a hallway ending in darkness. "Quick little bastard, aren't you?" I smiled. Even though my knee hurt and my shirt was wet, I was somewhat impressed he did it without me seeing him. I turned back towards the living room and went to shut off the TV again. I just wanted to crawl into bed and sleep. When I was only a few steps away from the remote, the TV suddenly shut off on its own. I stood there for a few seconds, looking at the remote control and realizing that there was no way for anyone to turn off the TV that wasn't directly in front of me. That's when I felt the presence of someone standing behind me. It sent a shiver through my body, and I slowly set my glass of water on the table. I hoped it was just Connor messing with me. Maybe he had an extra remote, and he decided to play a trick on his cousin. Give her a full dose of Mischief Men on her first night babysitting. I felt eyes on me, though, and something deep in the pit of my stomach told me that they were not the eyes of a playful 5-year-old. I leapt towards the living room light, nearly tripping over my feet as I reached for the switch. Light suddenly filled the room and I spun on my heel, afraid of what I was going to see. What I saw was nothing at all. "They're investable." Connor's words ran through my head as I stood there staring at the dining room table and the empty kitchen beyond. "No, that's totally insane, Caitlin," I told myself. "It's a kid's book and an overactive imagination." I took a deep breath and flicked the light off, wondering what exactly I was allowing myself to get so paranoid over. So I missed a chair in the dark. The TV shut off on its own, probably from a damn timer, and I got spooked in the dark. Jesus, Caitlin. I laughed to myself and grabbed my water off the table. I took another sip and set the glass down again, No sooner had it left my hand than it suddenly went flipping up off the table and shattered against the far wall. I barely had time to jump before it seemed the whole living room went insane with activity. The dining room table shot off to one side, slamming into the bar that separated the living room and the kitchen. All the chairs slid in the opposite direction, smashing into the couch, most of them tipping over. All the kitchen cabinet doors flew open at once, and pots, pans, and dishes came raining down. I listened as they clanged and shattered on the linoleum. A startled scream froze in my throat as the TV started flickering on and off, illuminating the shadow of something moving across the room towards the hall. It was tall, nearly 8 feet if I had to guess, and it was as thin as a rail, its arms and legs at least twice the size of its torso. Its head appeared bulbous and too large for its thin frame. I couldn't see the actual thing itself, just a shadow transposed on the wall in the blue flickering glow of the television. They're investable. Picture frames flew off of the walls as it moved, as if its shadow were knocking them down. As one of Connor fell from the wall, I realized where the thing was heading and jumped over the couch, headed towards it. One of the chairs hopped off the floor and struck me on the shoulder, knocking me off of my feet. I howled in pain as I slammed my elbow into another chair on the way down. I tried to keep moving, but household objects continued to fly at me as I made my way down the hall. More chairs, pots, and pans flew from the kitchen, banging against the wall as I did my best to dodge them. I saw the door to Connor's room open and tried to scream to him, but just before the words left my mouth, a picture frame struck me just above the right eye. I fell onto my ass and felt a warm trickle of blood leak down my face. I shook my head clear and got to my feet just in time to hear Connor's door slam closed. The thing was in there with him. I got to my feet and sprinted the last few feet to the door. I wrenched at the door handle as best I could, but it was as if it had been nailed shut. I screamed for Connor and could hear his sweet little voice talking just beyond.
What about Caitlin?
He asked whoever was in there with him. I heard no response.
Why can't she come?
I pounded my fist against the door. I kicked against the wood as some sort of dim white glow started leaking from beneath the crack in the door.
Could she come later? Will Mommy be there?
The light grew brighter, and I could feel the door vibrating beneath it. I continued beating a tattoo into it with my fists.
I don't know. But you gotta stop doing bad stuff. Daddy gets mad.
I shouldered into the door as hard as I could. Tears streamed down my face. I had no idea what was happening, but I knew exactly what was about to happen. The light grew brighter.
Do you promise? Okay. You don't look like you do in my book. You look funny.
He giggled. The last sound I ever heard out of my cousin's mouth was that innocent little giggle. The door suddenly flew open, and I was nearly blinded by the brightness of the light pouring out of the room. All I could see beyond was a blur of shapes. 3 that looked like the shadow I had seen before. Tall, thin things with bulbous heads. The one in the center was holding my cousin's hand, and they were walking towards what should have been a wall. I screamed till my throat hurt and reached out for them, but it was all silence in my own ears. Some great rumble had filled the house, and something that felt like electricity had filled the air. The hair on my arm stood up, and it felt like my brain was on fire. I tried to run towards them, but was thrown backwards hard My back crashed against the wall of the hallway, and I watched, dazed and helpless, as the things walked away with my cousin, walked away into the light. Just as quickly as it had all started, it ended. The light blinked out, the rumble stopped, and Connor was gone. I was left alone in a house that looked like someone had let a wild animal loose in it. I searched the whole place for Connor. I hoped in my heart I could find him, that he was still there, that I was wrong. He had vanished. They had taken him. The Mischief men. My uncle never forgave me. I like to think he would have in time, but he died of a heart attack 2 months after Connor disappeared. It's been a year, and I relive that night every time I close my eyes. I can remember the search parties beating the bushes around the woods, looking for Connor. The Amber Alerts. No one believing the testimony of a traumatized 16-year-old girl. I knew, though. I knew they would never find him.
Thank you for listening. If you haven't already, don't forget to cast your vote for this contestant via either a thumbs up or thumbs down vote. By doing so, you'll help us determine who will become the next permanent member of our voice acting team. At the close of voting on September 23rd, based on your votes, the top 5 contestants will progress to the 4th and final round to take place live on October 31st at our annual Halloween live stream event, based entirely on your votes. Thank you for voting and for helping to spread the word. You're listening to Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. I'm Steve Taylor, host of Chilling Tales, the podcast, encouraging you to turn off the lights and turn on the dark.
Chilling Tales for Dark Nights.